Hey, campfire crew. Let's get it on.
The Fighter. This is as scary as it is crazy that this could happen in America. I was a bartender for about 2 weeks once. Didn't have any real interest in learning to mix drinks, but a friend really needed the help and offered to teach me, so I agreed. Worst mistake ever. It was this shitty little bar in a town of around 5,000 people. Even for a town with only 3 bars, 2 of which changed owners every couple of months, this place had a reputation. Hard asses, suicide cases, and young idiots trying to win a dare were the people who went to this bar. Cops were there every night of the week, and sometimes with repeat visits on the same shift. A fucking nightmare. In fact, there were only 3 murders the entire 10 years I lived in this town, and every one of them was linked to this bar in one way or another. I witnessed one of them, or at least I think I did. A week and a half after I started working, one of our regulars came in. He wasn't a tatted-up parolee, biker, drug dealer, or any of the normal shit, but people knew not to fuck with him. Whenever someone started shit with this guy, they got a free ambulance ride. He never got charged though, because he always goaded them into tossing the first punch, and he quit the minute they hit the ground. I guess that's legally important, because the cops always said if it was self-defense, then he could go. Anyway, one night a couple of off-duty cops come in. They still had the uniforms on, but not the utility belt. No radios, guns, mace, any of that shit. I guess they didn't want anyone trying to start shit with them, and they used the badge to ward off any bigger idiots. It worked. Everyone kind of went quieter as the cops strode in, watching nonchalantly as they made a beeline for the guy nobody fucked with. My spidey sense was tingling. Something was up, though I was too new to say what. I started pouring beers and tried to pretend I didn't feel like a pair of tigers had just strolled into the bar. I mean, seriously, it skeeved me the fuck out. For 5 or so minutes, the cops kept it pretty buddy-buddy with the fighter, and then they started arguing. It was almost nothing at first. A little flush on their cheeks, whispers that were more urgent than a friendly chat required. The regular seemed to be trying to ignore them, like everyone else. Then he started getting drawn in, arguing back and shaking his head. Out of curiosity and self-interest, I poured him another beer and walked over for a casual, "Hey, everything all right?" All 3 of them fried me with their gaze. Whatever the fuck was going on, I wasn't welcome. Point taken. I went back to slopping beer for the rest of the dangerous idiots. Did I mention how much these assholes love to beat each other up? I mean, 'cause it was mind-blowing to a 20-something with a strange desire to not get knocked the hell out of on a regular basis. It was like they hadn't even heard of concussions or brain damage or jail or any of the million things that could have kept them out of this bar. It didn't take long. A fight broke out. The 2 cops tried to take on the regular at the same time, shouting incoherently as he pounded them both with effortless ease. The fighter was a machine. Swing, connect, turn, repeat. 2 guys, 2 cops, and he wasn't holding back any more than he did for some meathead with roid rage. Before I could even react, one of the cops was laid out cold, and the other pulled a knife. He got a lucky jab in and the regular went down, clutching his abdomen. You know, TV really gets blood wrong. It was so fucking bright, squirting between his fingers. The waitress called 911, made the report, and tried to get the bouncers involved. They'd seen the knife and weren't having anything to do with it. The stabber cop roused the other one, applied basic first aid, and then helped the ambulance crew get it taken care of. For a few days, I checked the paper and local news. I wanted to hear about the aftermath. I mean, off-duty cops stabbing a guy in a fight they started? Come on, this shit isn't supposed to happen in America. The fighter didn't come back before I left, and the cops never showed up in any investigation or breaking news story. No bar fight, no hospital stories, no crime scene investigation, nothing. I heard a couple of the other regulars wondering about it too, but by the time I'd quit less than a week later, no one had any answers. My friend who owned the place said he checked it out and couldn't find any answers either. I know I don't believe him. In any case, that was the end of my bartending career. I collected my last check and left. I still wonder about the fighter who got stabbed. Man, he was a hell of a fighter. And I'm pretty sure he enjoyed busting heads, but nobody deserves to disappear. The whole scene was just crazy as hell. The Night I Stopped Talking to Strangers at Bars by Bitterjoy Crusher. This is a mildly long one, as I'm long-winded and detail-oriented. This is a traumatic encounter I had in May of 2012. It was a Saturday night, and I went out to a bar with friends. We were dancing and being obnoxious, of course, and this dude kept looking at us. I didn't pay him much mind. He was cute, but I was not in the mood to talk to some stranger. Anyway, the night progressed, and one of my friends gave him my number, without my permission, by the way. That guy and I are no longer friends due to his disregard for anyone but himself. So this dude texted me. Okay. I responded politely, and we ended up having some decent conversations. We had a lot in common. Movie taste, music taste, and general witty banter. I'm including this so you understand why I chose to go out with this stranger. 2 weeks later, we meet up at the same bar. We hung out, had some beers, but he was drinking pretty excessively. My dad is an alcoholic, so that is always a red flag for me. He seemed to be handling himself well, though, and a few of my friends showed up for support and potential protection. A few hours into the date, he told me how pretty I am. Aw, I thought, that's always nice to hear. We were sitting out on the deck, drinking and enjoying the evening. I hadn't yet realized my friends went into the bar, and no other patrons were outside. He didn't stop there, though. This dude leaned in close to my ear, and I could feel the hot breath, and it was not a turn-on. I could smell the shitty Bud Light on his breath mixed with garlic or something. Then he started whispering to me, "You remind me a lot of my ex." Oh, fuck, I thought. I'd already been losing interest in this situation, but that feeling was growing immensely. Then he continued, "I thought she was a spy, you know, for the government. I used to have bad schizophrenia. Psychiatrists are bullshit, though, so I self-medicated with OxyContin and shit." I pulled back, but he put his arms around my shoulders and pulled me back. I felt my ear knock against his teeth, and my whole body grew numb with fear. And this is when I noticed we were alone. I'm gonna go use the restroom," I said. I fucking needed out. Fight or flight kicked in, and he looked strong. "I'm not done," he said, squeezing tighter on my shoulders. "Just let me tell you this." I pushed my elbow against his ribs, casually but forcefully. I didn't want to escalate anything, but I needed the fuck out. "I really have to pee quick. I'll come right back." I put my other hand on the bench we were sitting on, using the force to try to propel me up. The fucker pulled me back down, and he fucking chuckled like it was cute or something. "Sorry," he said. "Just stay. I have something important to tell you." I remember he started rubbing my arm like he was trying to soothe me into complacency. So I screamed. I screamed loud, "Let me go! Stop! Get off of me!" I screamed words that I hoped would alert people that I wasn't just a drunken loudmouth. "What the fuck? I seriously, like what?" he asked. I remember the smell of garlic had gone away, and the alcohol was all I could smell. It triggered even more panic in me, as it was reminiscent of my father's alcoholic outbursts. "Ashley! Ashley!" I screamed out for my best friend, and still, no one came out. It was one of those patios that's fenced in, with a large, thick metal door to get back into the bar. There were no windows to see in either. I still didn't struggle physically. I worked with individuals who had severe aggression and behavioral disorders and had been trained to believe that the more you physically fight, the more it escalates. "The voices aren't bad anymore. I medicate with alcohol now," he shouted. He didn't sound mad, though. He seemed confused, like he didn't understand why I was so incredibly fucking done with it. "My ex. She may have been a spy. I stabbed her by accident. Kind of. She left me, and you look like her, and I like that, okay? I just care about you. I want to be with you." His voice calmed through that conversation. The smell of garlic came back, and I felt my body grow a little limp in resignation. And then the door opened, a loud clunk as the metal hit the brick. Laughter. Ashley's laugh. I looked up and Ashley's laugh stopped, her body still. "Get the bouncer," I said. I'm so grateful I de-escalated situations for a living. It probably saved me from instigating further. The dude let go of me quickly. "You're still a bitch," he said. "You're gonna rot." At that point, I stood and ran, or walked fast, or did a silly slow run. I don't really remember. The adrenaline was pumping and nothing seemed real. I went towards my friends. The four of us ran into the bar, right behind Ashley, who already had the bouncer with her. After I saw Ashley with the bouncer, I sat on a stool and fell apart. I was sobbing and shaking and heaving. The bartender gave me so many napkins to blow my nose with, eventually giving me an entire stack of them. Everyone had heard about the situation, so no one bothered me. My friend stayed with me that night. Everything was a huge blur after I got out of his grip at the bar. I don't remember talking to the bouncer or the owner, who banned the guy for life. And I don't really remember the encounter in my journal or eating an entire pizza by myself. The next day, I changed my phone number immediately. I avoid the area where that bar is located, and I don't really go out much at all. I went through the worst case scenarios, and that only escalated the anxiety from the encounter. My therapist helped out a lot. So, dude from the bar, let's not meet for real. Would-Be College Kidnappers by Taylor Dr. A little background. My dad is a police officer, ex-military, and my mom is one of those types of people who worries about literally everything. This led them to teaching me how to behave in a variety of potentially dangerous situations, from code words to self-defense. I wish I were kidding, but we even have a plan for zombie apocalypse. Literally any potential disaster, we've discussed it. Fortunately, I lived a very safe life and did not have to use their advice very often. I am also an incredibly light sleeper. Even a text vibration on my phone wakes me up immediately. During the summer before my third year of college, I was living with a good friend of mine. We can call her E. E was very book smart, but somehow had zero situational awareness, as well as a horrible tendency to be the most annoying person you've ever met in your life after having one drink. At the time of this story, I was 20 and she was already 21. This led to a few nights of me getting pissed off, because she would want to go to the cooler bars her other friends wanted to go to, but that I couldn't get into with my shitty fake. This particular night, we had talked about going out and had even gotten ready together. Then, right before we were supposed to leave, she switched it up and decided she was actually going to meet her other friends at a bar I couldn't go to, and with an, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I wasn't able to tell her she can't do something, but I walked away visibly pissed and went to bed early. I woke up at around 3 because I had received a few texts in a row. Knowing it was her, I was extremely tempted to turn over and go back to bed. I decided to quick check and see what she wanted and saw multiple separate texts from E that said things like, "OMG! Wake up! Please wake up! I'm in so much trouble. Please help me!" Unfortunately, I've gotten a new phone since this happened and don't have access to the original text. I asked her what was happening, and she tells me with lots of misspellings because, well, alcohol, that her friends had left her at the bar. They didn't answer when she tried to call them, and that when she was standing outside the bar trying to call her friends, 2 older guys asked if she needed help. She told them that she was just trying to get a hold of her friends so she could go home. To this day, I question why she didn't just order an Uber when she realized she was alone, but again, alcohol. These 2 men point to a car and say it's their Uber, and if she'd like to go, they don't mind dropping her off at home. E decides this sounds like a great idea and gets into the car with them. One guy sits up front with the driver, and one sits in the back with E. This is obviously when things start to go south. E notices that they appear to be going in the wrong direction, and makes a comment that she lives the other way. No one says anything to her. Now, the car has gotten onto a major highway that you would take if you wanted to leave our large city for the neighboring large city approximately 45 minutes away. This is the point where she started texting me for help. I tell her she needs to speak up, but she keeps telling me that she's too afraid to say anything. I tell her to say that she's going to be sick, I mean, no Uber driver will want you puking in the car and will pull over so you can get out. This is what my mom had drilled into my head as a kid. If you don't like something someone is doing in a car, tell them you're going to be sick. E refuses because she's too afraid. She finally asks where they're going, and they say a large city. And she tells them, no, I live in the other city. And the guys laugh and say, well, just think of it as a suburb of your city. Now, E has gone into full panic mode. I've already run out of the house and am attempting to follow them. I have her sending me to her location on her iPhone repeatedly so I can try to catch them. I'm telling her to get the fuck out of the car and do not get back in. I was flying down the highway, but they still had maybe a 20-minute head start. I wanted to call the police because 1, we obviously need help, and 2, I'm driving in excess of 100 miles an hour down the highway and do not want to be pulled over. Unfortunately, E can't give me a description of what car she's in. No color, no make, nothing. I don't know how she finally spoke up or what she even said, but she was able to get the Uber driver to stop at a gas station that was, quite literally, the only thing around. Like it was an exit to a gas station, just to enter back onto the highway. There was nothing else in the area. She's texting me to tell me they're pulling into a gas station, and I tell her to get her ass into a bathroom stall, lock the door, and do not move until I get there. And if she can't do that, go stand next to the clerk and tell him to call the police, because she does not know these men, but I swear to God, E, don't get back in the car. I don't care if they carry you kicking and screaming, you fight tooth and nail to stay out of that car, I told her. But of course, this is E, and she didn't listen. She instead chose to hide behind the gas station. At this point, I was just minutes away and figured I could get there before they went looking for her. Alright, I was a 20-year-old female, average to shorter height and average weight. Athletic, but not a Hulk by any means. So I have no idea what I thought I would be able to do to these 2 30-year-old guys or whatever, and their Uber driver. I had also run out of bed without getting dressed, so I was wearing fleece Guitar Hero pajama pants and a sports bra. No shoes. I pull into the gas station parking lot, and their car is the only one there. I got out of my car and marched up to the one standing by the gas station wall and quite literally went toe-to-toe with him, and in my best, low, cold, furious anger voice, asked him where E was and what the hell he thought he was doing. This grown man couldn't look me in the eyes and didn't bother speaking, but rather pointed to the back of the building. I yelled to E to get out here right now, we are going home. She comes around the building wearing only her bra and jeans, no shirt. I put her in my car and turn around to start yelling at the men, but as I turned, their Uber was already squeaking tires to get out of the station. E and I had a very quiet ride home, and I turned into my mother and told her that I wasn't mad at her. She was crying and apologizing to me, but I told her she was safe now, but that next time she needs to react quickly and speak up for herself, because who knows what could have happened. Oh, and she didn't have a shirt on because there was a hill behind the gas station that she fell down and into a bramble patch. Her shirt was covered in stickers. This story isn't as outright terrifying as most of the ones I read about, but thinking about what could have happened had I not caught up with them, and just how easy it was them to do this chills me to the bone. So, to my 2 would-be rapist kidnappers, let's not meet for your sake. Crazy Drunk, submitted by TomTom41. When I was in college, there was a strip of bars that everyone went to, and there were plenty to choose from. There were old man bars, nightclub dance places, live music places, and then those ones off the beaten path that were really only full of townies. For some reason, my friends and I liked to hit those up once in a while. They were quieter, and you could get a game of pool or darts in without having to wait for a row of quarters ahead of you. When we first started going to this one place, I'll call it Aces because it's still open and I don't want to use their real name, the townies were unsure of us. I mean, we were just punk kids from the school, but when they realized we were just going to hang out, drink beer, shoot pool, they got to like us. Except this one guy, I'll call him Steve. He used to complain to the bartenders and owners that we shouldn't be there, but we tipped very well and they didn't care. Shit, we caused less problems than a lot of the townies. At any rate, we were hanging out one Saturday night watching a hockey game before we went downtown to hook up with some other friends and find some women. It was me, let's call me Tom, my friends Scott, and Mike, who we called Big Mike. We're still all good friends, and Mike is still a big dude. 6'4", 220, built like a brick shithouse. We're all just hanging out and drinking and playing pool and darts with the locals. I should call them locals. They were cool, not like a lot of the townies who hated us students and always started shit. And we were laughing and betting on the game with stupid bets like who would score next in the hockey game and stuff like that. Then in comes Steve. Everyone could see that he was already pretty well in the bag. So he sits on a bar stool and asks for a beer, and then just starts staring at the screen, not saying anything. The bartender tries talking to him, and he doesn't say anything back. We keep playing and laughing and having a good time, and then Scott pipes up and says, "All right, boys, one more game of cricket and we should vamoose." Suddenly, Steve spins on his stool and says, "What the fuck is that? What the fuck is vamoose?" Everyone just kind of looks at each other like, what the fuck? And he says it again. "What the fuck is vamoose? Is that some wetback shit talk?" I should say that the college I went to was not super rural, but it wasn't near a big city either. The town over did have a large Hispanic population, though, and I could sense there was some tension with this guy. So as we're just standing there, the bartender leans over and says, "Take it easy, Steve, it's just an expression," and gets him another beer. He keeps looking at us for another minute, and then turns around. We're all like, what the fuck? I put some quarters in to play cricket. It was me and Scott versus two of the locals. I'll call them Paul and Jerry. Mike and Tom play a game of 9-ball and finish before we beat our friends by one bullseye and some points. Jerry laughingly yells out, "That's some serious bullshit right there," and we all shake hands, and then I fall forward as Steve has jumped up and pushed me in the back. Jerry and Paul grab me and say, "What the fuck was that?" By now, the bartender and two other guys are grabbing Steve and telling him to cut the shit, but he's not calming down. Finally he does, and everyone is just looking at him. And as drunk as he was, he quickly grabbed a bottle and chucked it right at us, and nearly hit Scott in the face before it smashed into the dart machine. Everybody jumped into action as Steve ran at us. Big Mike jumped in front of him, and the guy takes a swing, and Mike just turns and the punch hits his arm. Mike grabs the guy by the throat while two locals grab Steve, and the bartender is yelling out for everyone to just relax. He runs around the bar and Mike lets the guy go. Long story short, Steve gets booted and told if he ever comes back to call on the cops. He's forced out the door and the bartender asks if everyone is okay. We're all amped up and just babbling away the way that you do when you're full of adrenaline. The bartender yells out, Okay, shots on the house for everyone." We all start laughing and salute to each other. Shaking hands with everyone, the three of us say we'll see everybody around and head out to the next place. Everything in this town is within walking distance, but Ace's was about a mile or so from the main strip. As we're walking, I get an uneasy feeling and keep looking behind us as we walk through a neighborhood on the sidewalk. Scott notices and asks, "What's up?" "Nothing," I say. "I just got a weird vibe going on, man." We got to the next place, and it was about 11 o'clock, so people were really starting to show up in large numbers, and we're having a good time with our friends, and we do find some ladies. I talked with this super cute girl that was on the swim team at our school. At the end of the night, I offered to walk her home. Yeah, I know, sly fox move, right? She says she's going to her friend's house, but we exchanged numbers, and she says she wants to get together tomorrow. I ended up dating her for 5 years before we broke up. We're still friends. Awesome woman, but I digress. So now there's 5 of us, as Mark and Hank are joining the 3 of us for one last wobbly pop before we head back to our apartment complex. We're all a little stewed, and maybe that's why we didn't notice what was going on as we walked down the main street back home. We were being followed by 4 guys. As the downtown part ended and we got into neighborhoods, Big Mike says he needs to take a leak and runs behind a bush in front of a house. We all stop to wait for him when suddenly we hear him yell out. I turn and see the 4 guys we didn't know were there behind us, behind Mike, and what happened was Steve had rounded up some of his buddies and followed us around all night. Steve had smashed the back of Mike's knees with a piece of rebar, and the other guys started to hit him when he buckled. We all jumped over the bushes and just blasted into these guys. I'm only 5'11" and about 180 pounds, and some of these guys were way bigger, but I didn't care. Again, I'm sure beer had something to do with it. Everyone kind of picks a guy, and I slam into Steve, and he drops the piece of rebar. I scrambled to pick it up and just started beating him with it. He's on his chest with his hands on his head, and I'm wailing away on his back like a maniac. He's yelling, "Stop! Stop!" And I'm fucking crazy now, and I'm yelling all this macho bullshit back at him. And every time I smash him, I'm saying, "Stop! How about now, motherfucker?" Next thing I know, I've got stars in my head, as one of the other guys had knocked down Hank and punched me in the side of the head. Everything was in slow motion, and I see Scott and Mark kicking a guy on the ground. Big Mike is going to town on another townie, and this other dude throwing me another punch to the gut. Steve is on the ground all fucked up, and the guy with me flicks out a knife and swings at me, and in my haze, I stumble backwards over Steve, and the guy just grazes my head right above my temple. I fall back and can feel something warm on my face, and blood flows into my eye. By now, the lights from the house rat have come on, and everyone kind of stops. Steve and his buddies kind of get up and start running off, and Big Mike grabs me and tells me we have to go. A guy comes out on the porch and says he's called the cops, and now I know we really need to go. We start running, but like a shithead, all that does is make the blood pour out of my head cut faster, so I take my flannel shirt off and wrap a sleeve around it. We finally get back to our apartment complex, and Scott is freaking out about getting me to a hospital, but Mark, who was studying to be a personal trainer, looked at it and said it wasn't that bad and wouldn't need stitches. He cleaned it up, and I looked at everyone. Scott's got a swollen eye, Hank has dried blood on his nose, and the only two guys unscathed are Big Mike and Mark. We've started coming down from the adrenaline rush, and Mike has thrown us all a beer, and I've got a massive headache starting up. That's when the front window of our place cracked. Someone had thrown something at it. Mike and Mark ran to the door and opened it to look out into the parking lot, and it was quiet and lit only by a couple of street lamps with that orangish glow. Then, another rock came whizzing by and hit the door right next to them. 3 of the guys, including Steve, were at the edge of the lot and throwing shit at our place. Hank, Mike, and Mark run out at them, and I call the cops. I mean, enough was enough. I watched them fighting from our stoop and told the police what was going on. Steve saw me and made a run for me, but he tripped on a parking block and cannoned into a car and smashed his face on a headlight. Honestly, I started laughing. But then I stopped when I saw him pull a gun from his pocket. I yelled to my guys that there was a gun, and that's when this drunk shithead started pulling the trigger. By now the lights are turning on in all of the apartments, and people are at their windows and doors or coming outside wondering what the fuck is going on. The police can hear what's going on and are asking me what I can tell them, and that's when Steve stumbles towards me and points the gun at me. I back up into my place when he pulls the trigger. Nothing happened. He looks down at it like he's wondering what happened too, when Mark comes up and throws a huge haymaker from behind, and I heard Steve's jaw snap. Steve falls to the ground, the other guys had run off, and we can hear the police sirens coming around the corner. Long story shorter, the police arrested Steve for assault and a slew of other things, and it turns out he had more warrants to go with that. They caught the other guys later that night, or morning, I guess. My friends and I didn't get away scot-free, though. After telling the police the entire story, we got reamed for underage drinking, which I guess we were guilty of. But they didn't take any of our beer, which I thought was funny. We found out later that they did talk to the guys at Aces about us hanging around in there, and that needed to come to an end. Funny? It didn't. About a month later, we were there when one of the cops came in off duty with his wife. He saw us and just shook his head. We had to show up in court to testify as to what Steve did, and I'll be honest, my parents were not thrilled with me and what I had gotten myself into. I still have the scar above my eye, but it's not that bad. Looking back at what I wrote, I kind of glossed over the gun thing because it happened so fast. At the time it was just surreal, but now that I have kids and I'm looking back at that situation, it's terrifying to me. I mean, I came so close to getting shot, and that scares the shit out of me as an adult. I don't remember what happened to Steve and his friends other than going to jail, but I do know I spent 3 more years at that school and in that area, and I never saw them again. The psycho at my restaurant. This isn't as scary as it is crazy, but I suppose it was pretty creepy to the guy it happened to. One day, back when I was working as a hostess at a restaurant, a woman strolled into the lobby looking rather shifty. I cheerily greeted her as she came through the front door, but she continued on past the front desk with not so much as a glance in my general direction. As a hostess, I was used to being ignored by customers, and I figured she was just too focused on trying to find someone she was supposed to be meeting for lunch. Discreetly following her, I kept a few paces behind in case she needed my help. That is, until she came to a stop behind a nearby table. She stood there for a few minutes, nervously clutching her purse and eyeing the man sitting in the booth. His back was to her, and as she ducked up and down to get a better view of the guy, I thought maybe she was meeting him on a blind date and she was trying to size up the guy before deciding to take a seat or run out of the restaurant before he noticed. It was weird, however, that the man had only asked for a table for one when he entered the restaurant. "May I help you?" I asked the woman politely. She shook her head, so I walked towards the front desk and told her that if she needed a menu or anything else, to please come and get me. She took a deep breath and approached the table, quickly sliding into the booth to face him. No hello, no hey, how are you? And they started up in what seemed to be the middle of a conversation that they had already been involved with. And it was quite the heated discussion, if I may say so. The man's plate arrived to the table, and the waiter asked if the woman wanted anything. She shook her head and continued to stare at the guy who was now picking up his fork and knife to eat. After about 10 minutes, I could hear the woman's voice more and more as the conversation grew more intense. The man was trying to shush her, but she wouldn't have it. He finally did, though, and asked the waiter for the bill. Their server placed the check on the table and walked away to give the two of them some more space. Before I knew it, the man was coming up to the front desk asking me to quickly get the waiter because he needed to leave right then. I got their waiter, and the man paid. All the while, the woman was just sitting there staring angrily at him. He walked out of the restaurant, saying a quick thank you, and the woman stayed behind, sitting in the booth. As I walked by, I'm not going to lie, I was a little scared. She had that "you're dead to me" look that Lily sometimes has on How I Met Your Mother. She was pissed. Then suddenly she was up and running out of the restaurant. I went to the front desk to look out the window into the parking lot and saw her yelling at the guy as he was opening the door to his car. She continued to run towards him and then threw herself between him and the driver's side door, slamming the door shut and preventing him from getting in. The man then calmly walked around the car to the passenger side door and unlocked it and slid into the seat. The woman pulled the door open on her side, and as the man climbed into the driver's seat, she threw herself onto him, her legs dangling out of the car. He was desperately trying to push her off, but she'd wedged her legs into the door of the car so that there was no way he was getting her off of him. She tried to hold on for dear life as he attempted to exit the car by the passenger side. Meanwhile, people walking by were starting to watch the scene unfold before them as the man finally freed himself from her grasp. He ran out of the car and started heading back towards the restaurant. I quickly ran behind the front desk so he wouldn't notice me watching the craziness of what was happening outside, and I saw the woman getting out of the car and slamming the driver's side door as the man asked me, and very politely I must add, to call him a cab. So I did. He waited in the front lobby as the woman paced around outside waiting for him to come out. She had finally had enough of waiting and stormed into the restaurant and took a seat right next to him. I mean, she literally made sure that the whole side of her body was touching his, and then she just glared at him as he stared blankly ahead. She talked. He didn't. I saw the cab pull up to the front door, so I told the man that his cab had arrived, and he thanked me and got up to leave. The woman shouted at him to not go, but he wouldn't listen. As he got into the cab with her yelling at him, she did the same thing before when he was trying to get into his own car. She threw herself onto him, making sure to dangle her legs out of the car so the driver couldn't drive away. After about 5 minutes, I could tell the cab driver was starting to get extremely angry. He yelled at them to both get out and drove away, never looking back. That's when she pulled out a knife and started waving it around. By this time, the man was finally starting to yell. I could see him yelling at her to get away from him. He attempted to get back into his car, but she was a complete maniac at this point and was one step ahead of him the whole time. I saw him trying to push her away from the car door, and then suddenly he was off and running. He had somehow grabbed her own set of keys and was running to her car. She chased after him and caught up to him before he could figure out which key was for her car, and a screaming match began. All the while, he was trying to fake her out by running back to his car and then quickly spinning around to run back to hers. She's screaming and thrashing around with this knife. Finally, he gave up trying, and she just kept screaming and crying and waving the knife around. She moved in and tried to wrestle her keys away from him, but he grabbed her by the knife arm and held on with all his might. And then he did something that made me think, shit, did he really just do that? I even asked it out loud to the two other waiters who had joined me to watch this crazy show going on in the parking lot. We were shocked. The man had thrown her keys into the middle of the street, pushed her away, and made a run for it as she watched where her keys landed. She stared with her mouth hanging open as she realized what he'd done. He ran as if running for his life, and you could see the split-second decision-making the woman was doing. Keys or the guy? Keys or the guy? She decided to make a run for her keys as the man jumped into his car. At that moment, no cars were driving down the road, so she ran right into the middle, grabbed her keys like a football player running drills, and made a mad dash back to his car. She was too late as he pulled out of his parking spot and headed towards the exit. She tried to run out in front of his car, but he had already pulled ahead of her before she had a chance to pretty much throw herself onto his moving vehicle. She bolted to her own car, threw the knife away, got into the driver's seat, and drove off like the Dickens, heading in the same direction he did. The whole day, the staff talked about what was going on. Some thought it was his mistress, and he just called things off, and she couldn't let it go. Some thought it was his wife or girlfriend who was just checking up on him to see if he was cheating on her. Some thought maybe it was some psycho stalker. Whatever she was, it was one of the weirdest moments I have witnessed at work, and I truly hope that guy is okay.
Working at a Haunted Restaurant by Ozzy. So this happened about 6 years ago when I was 20 years old and working my first job at a restaurant. I was a dishwasher / busboy. And this night it was a Saturday, and the restaurant was closing up. On the weekends, me and another coworker would stay after and clean up the restrooms, the kitchen and dining area, etc. My coworker was in the kitchen cleaning up the dishes, and instead of helping him, I decided to get a head start and start cleaning up the dining area. I put up all the chairs and began to sweep, and while sweeping, I was just listening to my music, moving through the tables and sweeping the rugs like I always did. However, I started to feel uneasy, as if something were watching me. I tried to ignore the feeling and kept working, but I just felt so uneasy. There were 2 tables across from each other at that end of the hall. One table was next to the window facing the boulevard. The other was near the restrooms, which was table 28. Once I got into a clear view of table 28, is when things started to get a lot more creepy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure of a man peeking at me whenever I would turn and look at that table, and it seemed like the figure would quickly hide back into the booth. I was starting to get scared out of my mind, and I began to sweat and just overall felt a feeling that I can't really describe. But I decided to thug it out and continue my cleaning. I guess the spirit, or whatever you want to call it, didn't like that. Didn't like that I was choosing to ignore it, despite being scared, as if it really wanted to let me know. Each table has a service button that customers can push to get the attention of the waitresses. As I was getting closer to the table, I heard the familiar sound of the service bell. I immediately ran to the cashier table, as you could see what table was requesting service on a small screen above where the host or hostess would stand. Sure enough, the signal was coming from table 28. I decided to let my coworker know about what was going on, and he was in the back still cleaning up the kitchen with both headphones on. He saw me go to the back and asked if I had finished up, and I told him what had happened. At first he didn't believe me. He even laughed at me. Then I told him to get quiet, and he did, and we both heard the service bell go off again. We both went to see which table it was, and again, the same table, and this time his face changed from laughing to fear, as he now saw that I was telling the truth. My coworker decided that we should just leave and tell the owner and manager what had happened. I agreed, and we decided to leave. The owner just laughed at us and said it was fine that we left. We ended up finishing cleaning the next morning before we opened. Before that experience, the owner would always joke, asking if we had had visits from the ghost yet. I didn't believe him, thinking he was just messing with us. But turns out, before the restaurant was on that property, it was a retirement home where several elderly people had passed away. So my guess is the spirits of the elderly would pay us a visit. After that experience, things went back to normal, but it was by far the scariest thing I've ever experienced, and I still get chills when I share this story.
Scary Guy at My Restaurant, submitted by Angel Hair Ann. My name is Ann, and I'm a professional chef at a restaurant in my hometown. I don't want to share the name. There are only a few upscale places where I live, and I think you can understand why I don't want to use specific names. I'll just refer to my restaurant as the Black Anchor. It's a steak and seafood place that is pretty costly. Our regulars are fairly wealthy, and it's the kind of place that people usually only come to on special occasions. We do have a separate bar menu that lots of people come to, but the dinner service and lunch service is on the expensive side. Our seating is very limited, and reservations are needed usually 4 to 5 weeks out, and that's describing when it's slow business. In the summer months, it's much longer. I guess what I'm saying is that this isn't an Outback Steakhouse. As executive chef, I'm in charge of the menu and new recipes, but also in hiring and training new kitchen staff. I've been here for 10 years and own a small stake in the restaurant, so I take things very seriously and vet every applicant when we have the need to hire someone, which is rare. Usually the only time people leave is because they're looking to start their own place or are just leaving the area. I had just hired a grad from the CIA, and I'll call him Stephen. He was young but very talented and showed great promise. He picked up our menu with little training, and I was ecstatic, and everyone liked him right away. He's really important to this story. Stephen is young, brash, and funny, but most of all, he is a hard worker. My staff is highly competent, but I could tell right away that Stephen was hungry to learn everything he could, and he would often come in early to bend my ear and talk about his culinary experiments at home. First to start, last to leave kind of guy. My sous chef, Andrea, was running things in the kitchen when this all started. I was supervising, but the owners wanted a new tasting menu, and it was taking up a lot of my time. One night, we were hopping, and I was helping in the kitchen when a server asked me if I could step out and speak to a customer. I said sure, but asked what the problem was, and she said she didn't think it was a problem. Normally, the owners and I walk around and check with people, and tonight I was just so busy that the owners, Kat and Nan, were doing that. The server told me what table, and I went out into the dining room. When I got to the table, it was a guy about my age. I'm 32, and he was with a woman who I assumed was his date. Honestly, she looked like she wasn't a day over 20, though. I asked if everything was all right, and this was my introduction to a man I'll call Roger. He said everything was amazing, and he just wanted to compliment me on a fine meal. I thanked him, and we spoke about what they had ordered, and he said he really liked the compressed radish avocado and prawn salad he had as an appetizer. Inside, I was happy, as that was something I was planning on putting on the tasting menu. The woman he was with said nothing, and when he reached out and touched my arm, he said, "If you're up for it, I'd really like to see you outside of here. Perhaps a drink or some coffee?" I was stunned. He said this right in front of this woman, and for a second I thought, well, maybe it's his sister.
I don't really date customers. I'm flattered, but I have to politely decline. Besides, I have a boyfriend, and you obviously have someone special too.
"She's not really my girlfriend, just a friend," he replied. He smiled and gave me a wink, and when he said that, I was appalled.
Thanks again, but I have to decline. Enjoy your desserts, I really have to get going.
He held onto my arm for another moment and said, "Of course." I turned and went back to the kitchen, and I told everyone what happened. We all laughed. Andrea asked if he was hot, and I said, honestly, he was pretty attractive. But when he referred to his date as basically a fuck friend, those looks went right out of my head. The rest of the night was just another busy Friday night, and dining service ends at around 9:30, so by 10, there were only a few people left at the bar, and they were also getting ready to leave. The kitchen had been cleaned, prep was done for lunch service the next day, and soon it was just me, Kat, and Stephen talking at the bar over a drink. I told Kat about what happened, and she asked which guy it was. I told her, and she said, Mr. Ferrari.
His name is Mr. Ferrari?
She said, no, he drove a Ferrari. All the valets were talking about it. She added, pretty good-looking guy, though. I just shook my head and changed the subject to the tasting menu. I even brought up a piece that Andrea and Steven had approached me with, mac and cheese with shaved Oregon black truffles. Kat said to make some up for her tomorrow. I winked at Steven, and although he just nodded, I could tell he was over the moon. We wrapped up. I said I would be in between lunch and dinner service tomorrow and headed for my car. As I was pulling out, though, I noticed a red Ferrari, and don't ask me what kind, I'm not a car gal. It was parked across the street. When I made my left, I passed by it, and I saw this guy Roger sitting in it by himself, talking on his cell phone. I laughed to myself and went home. My boyfriend Aaron was watching a baseball game and having a couple of beers with his friend Jock. We chatted for a minute, and then I said I was taking a shower, and when I got back, Jock was gone, and I told Aaron about Mr. Ferrari. He laughed and asked if I wanted him to kick his ass, and he could. He runs a gym in town and teaches MMA classes. He's 6 foot, 170, and built like a brick shithouse. I'm really a lucky gal for sure. We got a late night snack and went to bed, as we were planning on going kayaking in the river the next morning. I should point out that I'm not as fit as my boyfriend, but I'm in good shape, and I have what I think are so-so looks, but Aaron says I'm gorgeous. Thank you, honey. The next morning we ate, got into Aaron's Jeep that he had loaded up the night before, and off we went. It was only 7 a.m. or so, and there weren't many people at the launch, so for the next 2 hours we had a fun paddle pretty much to ourselves. We just talked and laughed. But when we were going under a bridge, Aaron looked up and stared at a guy above us looking through binoculars.
What's up, babe?
Nothing. A guy must be bird watching or something. We went under the bridge, and for some reason he turned his head on the other side. He said the guy was now on that side of the bridge looking around. We shook it off and after a while turned back. The guy was gone. Back home it was a quick roll in the hay, a shower, a keto lunch, and then back to work for both of us. When I rolled in, Nan was working with a new hostess and said there was something for me in the office. I went in to check emails and couldn't help notice the dozen roses and a card on my cramped little desk. Nan came in and I asked,
Where did these come from?
She just shook her head and said that they were from the florist down the street. I opened the card and read, "You are very beautiful, and I won't take no for an answer." I sighed and out loud said,
Mr. Ferrari.
And then told her about the night before. Nan took the flowers and said she'd put them by the hostess desk, and I got to work. Dinner service starts at 5, and I asked Andrea if she gave Kat her new piece, and she said yes, and she loved it. I told her great job, high-fived her and Steven, and started making sure everything was ready to go. Everything was running smoothly, so I went out to do my rounds and speak with customers, and was chatting with a regular couple for a few minutes, when I looked up and couldn't believe what I saw. Remember how I said reservations sometimes took up to 5 weeks to get? Well, he must have done just that, because at a table staring at me was Roger, Mr. Ferrari. He smiled and waved, and I walked over to him. I tried to play it cool, and he looked me dead in the eye and said,
"It sounds lame, but I couldn't stay away from you."
Really? 2 nights of reservations in a row?
He smiled and said,
"You know, sometimes there are other ways to get what you want. Those flowers were for you, not your entryway."
Thanks. Again, I'm flattered, but I'm also spoken for. Enjoy your meal. If you'll excuse me, I have other guests to attend to.
And I walked away to another table. About an hour later, I emerged from the kitchen, and he was gone. Thank God, I thought. He was very handsome, but what a creeper. I finished up work, answered some emails, did our weekly meeting with Kat and Nan, and then gave Steven our corporate card to get some black truffles tomorrow and meet me in the kitchen for an hour the next day. Normally, I'd order them from our distributor, but I wanted to experiment, and we have a choice market that carries 2 different kinds. I wasn't sold on the Oregon or Perigord and wanted to try both. The next day I told Aaron I was heading into work for an hour or 2, and he said he'd pick me up for a bike ride after I texted him I was free. When I got there, Steven was already there with the goods, and he said, "And I don't want to freak you out, but that Ferrari guy was parked out front when I got here, maybe 10 minutes past. He stopped me and asked a bunch of questions about you."
What kind of questions?
Well, like if you really did have a boyfriend, if you were from this area, stuff like that. I only told him I knew that you had an MMA boyfriend. He smiled.
How could he have known I was coming here today?
I said that out loud. Then I just shook my head.
Okay, what did you bring me? And give me that credit card back.
We laughed and made a couple of variants of the truffles. I texted Aaron when we were finished, and he was on his way and Stephen took off to see his new girlfriend. I changed into my riding stuff I brought with me and was outside doing some stretches when I heard a car revving, and I looked up from our parking lot. A red Ferrari was sitting at the mouth of the lot, and all I heard was,
"You look amazing in that outfit."
and then the car drove off. Doesn't take a genius to figure out who that was. Aaron came and got me, and we rode out to the country, and I told him about all the stuff that had happened in the last 2 days. I didn't mention the second night of Roger at the restaurant. He set his jaw, and I know that's his "I'm sizing things up" look. He didn't say anything other than, "If I have to, I'll handle this." After our ride, we went back to our cars and then went home. Monday is my only true day off, so I spent it around the house taking care of my plants, calling my parents, and one of my girlfriends, Stacy, came over for a dip in the pool. We were having some Hemingway daiquiris, just lying in the sun, and I told her all about this Roger guy. She said, "Wait, does he have a red Ferrari?" I said, "Yeah," and she said, "All right, bad news, kiddo. Stay away from him. If it's who I think it is, he's done some pretty bad things not too long ago. He's a big-shot corporate trader, but a trust fund baby. He's loaded, but I heard from my little sister that he raped a bartender at her joint, and he got away with it. Had some big-time lawyers paid to help get him off scot-free."
You've got to be joking.
She just said, "Nope, I'm sure it's the same guy. Tell Aaron right away and let everyone know at work. Just please be careful." We changed the subject, but I did tell Aaron about it when he got home, and he hugged me, and he told me he'd look into things. He's got a huge network in town, and I knew if there was anyone, he would be the one to find anything out. Nothing happened for the next 2 weeks, but one Friday night, at a table was Roger and another young girl. He smiled at me and waved, and I immediately went to the hostess stand. Kat and Nan had made explicit instructions not to honor any reservations from Roger. On busy nights, we have 2 hostesses, and when there was a lull in seating, I said quietly but firmly,
Who the fuck let that Roger guy and his little bitch in this restaurant?
They looked at me stunned. "We don't have a reservation for anyone named Roger," said Cassie. I looked at her book and she was right. The newer girl looked scared and said, "The good-looking guy with the girl about my age?" I gave her a death look, and she almost started crying. "He said his name was Simmons," and she pointed to the book. There it was. Simmons, Party of 2. It dawned on me that he must have been paying people for their reservations. I got my composure and said,
It's okay, it's not your fault.
and I apologized for going off.
From now on, he's not to be honored in this establishment, okay?
I went to get Kat and told her what was going on. If that's Chris Simmons, he must have paid a pretty big lump of cash to get his spot. Chris was a really wealthy real estate guy in our town. She went out into the dining room, spoke with Roger, and came back. I let him know that after tonight he won't be honored here anymore. Even with that news, I was raging inside, and I spent the rest of the night in the kitchen. 3 days later, I got a card in the mail with a box that just said, "Someday." It was a plain card in a plain envelope, but what was in the box was about a pound of white truffles from New Zealand, probably worth about $3,000. Aaron went through the roof when I showed it to him. He got on his phone and started calling around to get more information on this Roger guy, but all he could find out was that he had quit his corporate broker job weeks ago, and no one really knew where he lived.
Should we call the police?
And tell them what? A guy gives you flowers and maybe sent a vague card in the mail? Police won't do shit. A few more weeks went by and things quieted down. Then, one night, there was an issue with my Audi at the close of a Thursday night. I texted and called Aaron, but he didn't answer. Everyone else had left, and I did the most boneheaded thing I could do. I decided to walk home. I mean, it was only a couple of miles, and the summer night air was really nice. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. I wasn't thinking at all. I left a message for Aaron that I was walking home and started off. About a mile in and just outside of the urban area of our town, my cell went off, and it was Aaron. He was at home and super pissed that I was walking. He yelled at me that he was coming to get me, and I heard him jumping into his Jeep. That's when I felt an arm around my neck, choking me as someone from behind was pulling me off this little country road into a field. I was grabbing at the arm and trying to scream, though it was hard enough to breathe, let alone get that scream out.
See, there are other ways to get what you want.
It was Roger, and I was terrified. I cannot stress how awful this feeling is. Anyone who has been raped or had someone even attempt to rape them knows the helplessness and terror of it all. Roger basically tripped me and forced me onto the ground and put a hand over my mouth, pushing my head into the ground while ripping at my clothes. I was struggling to fight back, but he was strong. He had gotten my blouse ripped open and was going for my pants, and I could feel them sliding down, when all of a sudden, it stopped and his grip let go. He kind of fell over, and in the darkness, I could see a figure standing with a big branch or something. I was crying, but through my tears, I could see it was Stephen. Stephen had been out at a bar with his girlfriend and some friends and saw me walking by. The place he was at was just up the street from our restaurant. At first he didn't think anything of it, but after a few minutes, it dawned on him that something was probably wrong. He left his friends and started following me. When he caught up, he had picked up a huge branch on the side of the road and smashed Roger in the head. He asked if I was okay, and I nodded, and he helped me up just in time for Aaron to pass by. Aaron jammed on the brakes, backed up, and ran over to us. He looked at Stephen and said, "Get her in the Jeep." Then I heard him yelling stuff at Roger, and for one of us to call the police. Stephen did it as I sat there crying. I hadn't been seriously hurt, but I was scared to death. Sometimes emotional trauma is just as bad as physical trauma. The police and an ambulance came with their sirens going, and I could see Aaron holding a now-conscious Roger in a near-naked choke. I actually asked him what that move was called afterwards. He just kept saying to Roger, "Settle down, motherfucker, or I'll put you to sleep for good." He was beyond a rage. I looked at Roger and finally screamed out,
"How dare you! Fuck you, you fucking piece of shit!"
The ambulance took me to the hospital to check me out, but I was fine. Just emotionally devastated. I filed a report with the police. Roger was charged and held on bail, but he would make it the next day. Court proceedings took place, and this time his lawyers couldn't get him out of it. You might ask, how did he know I was walking home? You might ask, how did he know whenever I was at work? You might ask why we found out he was the guy on the bridge looking at us through binoculars. The very first night I met him, he followed me home, went to one of our windows, and put a small microphone and a transmitter device that he must have bought at some spy shop. The little wire went down into our front garden, and was halfway buried in our mulch. If you weren't looking right at it, you never would have noticed it. It was the creepiest thing. He heard all of our conversations, me and Aaron. Long story short, Roger got 5 to 10 years in prison, but my civil suit is still pending after 8 years. His lawyers keep throwing up roadblocks. I'm still at the Black Anchor. Stephen has moved on, and I'm still with Aaron. I can never forgive both of them for being there when I really needed them most, but I still apologize to them whenever I can for being such a blockhead and thinking it was a good idea to walk home. I'm working with a women's group now, bringing awareness of rape, and Aaron has also been drilling me with self-defense moves. Uncle Josh, I know you read them all, and I hope you read this, as it's not as terrifying as ghosts and monsters and whatnot. But this was the scariest thing that I hope ever happens to me in my life, and I'm looking forward to making sure that nothing like this ever happens again. To everyone out there, male or female, be safe and don't make the mistakes that I did. Never let your guard down, take everything seriously, and never walk alone anywhere at night. A Restaurant Stalker, submitted by Meganomics. My name is Julie, and this story took place a few years ago in 2013. I was working at a restaurant in my town in Oklahoma. It was a Hooters, and I got an unwanted stalker just by doing my job. If you don't know, Hooters is a place that the staff is mostly females who wear specific outfits that are all the same. I guess that's not really a fast food place, but I'm sending this to you anyway, Uncle Josh. So, our outfits are really short shorts at the time. Low-cut tops and shiny pantyhose. I haven't worked there in a couple of years, but I guess they have a different uniform now. Anyway, I was in college and worked there because the tips were usually good, and most of the people who came in to eat and drink were really cool. One night, a group of guys came in and got one of my tables. They were all there for some fantasy football thing, and at first were more into their event and just gave me orders for what they wanted as far as food and beers. As the night went on, one guy started acting a little odd. I could see he was checking me out, and that was okay. I mean, honestly, my clothing begged you to look at me. His name was Barry, and he was a little older than me and was in law school at the same place I was going to school. I checked on the table to see if they needed anything. I took another round of drinks, and then I felt Barry's hand brush against the back of my leg, right at the curve of my butt. I brushed it off as him just raising his hand to the table, and I went to get their drinks. I figured maybe I was too close to him, leaning over to get the drink orders. As the night wore on, I could feel him looking at me wherever I went, and it was getting creepy. When I went back to the table, I heard his friend saying, do it, just ask her, man." But it wasn't until the end of the night when they were leaving that he did ask me out. I told him I was flattered, but I had a boyfriend and was quote-unquote not on the market. He said that was a shame, and I said, "No, not really," and his friends all laughed. I lied. I had recently broken up with my boyfriend, but it was easier to say that I had one than to tell someone I wasn't interested in them. Maybe not the best way to do things, but oh well. The point isn't whether or not I was attached, but what happened after was crazy. They finished their football party, and I grabbed the money that they had left on the table, and as I counted it and checked the tab, they left me a decent tip. Then I saw a bill poking out of a folded piece of paper. It was a $100 bill with a note that said, "I think you should reconsider." There was a phone number on the note and the name Barry. I showed it to my coworker Fran. She said I was just a lucky bitch, and I wondered if I should keep it. I did keep it, but I later wish I hadn't. The next night I worked was 2 days later, and my friend Fran said the guy named Barry had been in the night before asking for me. I shrugged and didn't think much about it, but that night he came back in and took a seat at the bar. I had to walk past him a few times, and the third time he touched my arm and asked what I thought of his note. I simply said it was nice and thank you, but I'm just not interested. I should say at this point that Barry was not a textbook creeper. He was actually pretty good looking and in good shape, but there was just something off about him. He started to say something else, but I told him I had another table to get to and to have a good night. Things got busy and I didn't pay attention or notice him anymore, and he wasn't there at the end of the shift. Mike, my manager, walked me out to my car. He was a great guy and walked all of the girls to their cars, even if we were in a group, and he pointed to something on the windshield of my Eclipse. It was an unsigned note that said, "You'll be wrapping those legs around my head before you know it." It had to be Barry, and then I told Mike about him. He said he'd stay on it, and if Barry came back, he would let him know to lay off. I didn't see Barry the next few nights I was at work, but I started to get texts from an unknown number saying really sexual stuff about my body and what the person wanted to do to me. Some of it was in-depth, saying things like, "I want to tie you down and make your pussy foam," or "My cock wants to tickle your tonsils." I remember those distinctly. I never saved those texts early, but man, I never will forget those. Barry did come in with his friends again. I told Mike, and he made sure to give the table to another girl so I didn't have to deal with him. Barry went to the bathroom after a time, and Mike stopped him and was polite and told him he was welcome at the restaurant, but told him he needed to stay away from me. I guess Barry said no problem, and that was that. About a week later, I got back to my house that I shared with 3 other girls, and my roommate Leslie said there was something for me. It was one of those edible arrangements with chocolate-covered strawberries. There wasn't a card, and I thought maybe it was my ex-boyfriend. I was on good terms with him and texted him, and he said no, it wasn't from him. Again, the only thing I could think of was this guy named Barry. That night was the beginning of the insanity. I certainly wasn't going to eat any of the fruit and didn't want any of the girls I lived with to eat it either, so I threw it in our kitchen garbage can. The next morning, I woke up and screamed. The basket was on my desk, and some of the strawberries had condoms on them, and a typed note that read, "Don't you like fucking strawberries? Ha ha ha." My roommate Crystal was the only other person home, and she came running to my room and asked what was wrong. I pointed to the basket, and her eyes got huge. "What the fuck?" she asked. I got up and threw it into the garbage and posted to our house Facebook page that whoever did that wasn't funny, but everyone said they didn't do it. I immediately again thought of Barry, but how the hell could he have gotten into the house? I asked everyone if they had locked the doors, and Crystal said that she was the last one up, but she couldn't be sure that she did lock the door. Later that morning, I got a text from the unknown number that read, "I'm going to show you that pain can be pleasure." This was the first one that I screen capped because it actually frightened me. I went to work that night and showed it to Mike. He said I should call the cops, and I did, with nothing other than the text and the basket, but it had been handled by me and most of my roommates, so there wasn't much they could do. I tried blocking the unknown number, but I have no idea if that really did anything. I didn't see Barry at all and got no more messages on my phone or any other weird shit happening at my place. I was going home for Thanksgiving, so I was glad to get away for a little bit and just be with my family. My parents lived about 2 hours away, and I was going right after work that night. I had packed all my stuff earlier and had it in my car ready to go. I didn't want to waste any time going back to my house for it. Work was uneventful and kind of quiet, as most people were at other bars or probably doing what I was doing, getting ready to go home. I was gearing up for my dad. He didn't like that I worked at Hooters. Daddy's little girl stuff, I guess. Mike told me I could leave, and he walked me to my car and said Happy Thanksgiving, and I got on the road and turned up some music. All was well for the first hour, and there weren't a lot of cars out once I got off the highway. My parents lived out in the country, so it was just dark back roads with no streetlights until I drove through little villages on the way. I stopped at a gas station to get something to drink in one little town and to use the bathroom. I was in there for maybe 5 minutes, but when I got back to my car, there was a rose that had been painted black, and it was under my windshield wiper with another typed note that said, "Driving alone is dangerous for little girls. I am watching you." If I hadn't just gone to the bathroom, I might have peed myself right there. I jumped in my car, hit the wipers to get the stuff off, and flew out of the parking lot. I sped all the way to my parents' house, pulled in the driveway, and then ran into the house. I was nearing tears, and even though I was still wearing my Hooters outfit, my dad didn't say anything about it and asked what was wrong. After I told my parents a brief version of what had been going on, he went outside to get my things out of my car and looked up and down the road for some reason, and then came back inside. I showered and changed and sat with my parents in the living room, and that's when my dad started in on the "this is only happening because of that place you work" shit. And then my phone pinged. "Does Daddy have daughter issues? What will he say when my dick is in your ass?" read the text. My face went white and I showed my mom. She said she was calling the police and did. But the text didn't stop. "I have a gun and you'll be doing whatever I tell you to do soon." 5 minutes later, "I've made a special cage just for you. You'll be seeing it soon." This was a small town, and an officer came over and I showed him my phone. But again, just like before, there wasn't a lot he could do. He told me to keep saving the messages going forward and try to lay low. A lot of help he was, but I know it wasn't his fault. I went to my old room and called my friend Amy and just cried and cried, telling her I was so scared. My dad was really mad and went around checking the windows and doors. I finally started to settle down and fell asleep after turning my phone off. The next day I got up and was going to help my mom with the Thanksgiving Day food and wanted to also go for a run, but my dad said I should stay inside and just take it easy. I did need the charger for my phone, and I had left it in my car, so I went out to get it. Under the windshield was another note. This one was handwritten, and it said, "Don't you turn your fucking phone off on me again." I yelled for my dad, and he came out running and saw it. He called the cops this time, and another guy came out and took the note. I was scared, but I was also angry. My older brothers came home for the day and heard about what was happening, and they went into beast mode. They wanted to protect their little sister. I charged my phone, and about an hour later it rang. My dad said not to pick it up, and it went to voicemail, but whoever called didn't leave a message. Everything was quiet after that, and I tried to enjoy my long weekend as best I could. And I actually did relax enough to have a good time, but I got nervous when I knew I had to go home. My one brother had to drive the same way I did, so he tailed me to my house that Saturday afternoon and got me inside safely. My roommates weren't supposed to be back till later that night, and some of them were actually coming on Sunday, so I was going to be alone for a little bit, and I was trying not to freak out. I decided to watch a DVD and got engrossed in the Hunger Games, and for a while forgot that I was scared. Then I heard glass breaking in the kitchen. I jumped up and looked around the corner into the kitchen and saw a hand coming through the door window, opening the locks. I screamed and ran upstairs to my room and slammed the door shut and tried to push my desk against it. And then I hid in my closet, and that's when I could hear someone walking around downstairs. I was going to call the cops, but then realized I had left my phone downstairs in the living room. I was shaking and almost crying when I heard the footsteps come up the hallway and go into my roommate's room. My room was the next one down the hall. The intruder fumbled with the knob and pushed the door open, but the desk did stop it from opening. I was looking out a crack in the closet door, but couldn't see anything, and then I heard a voice say, "You could have made this easier." Then I heard loud thumping, and another voice say, "Get the fuck on the floor, motherfucker!" And a scuffling, and lots of grunts and stuff, and then a loud thud. Then another voice cried out, "You're not going anywhere, asshole!" There was a knock at my door. "Are you in there? Are you okay?" I opened the door and saw the face of a guy who lived next door. I got up and went over to him, crying my eyes out. I was hysterical. He and his roommate had seen Barry breaking into the back door and came running from their house. My saviors had knocked Barry to the floor, and one guy was basically sitting on him, keeping him down. I didn't know these guys that well, but I do know that they played rugby. They were big guys. "Call the police," said one guy. His name was Jeff, and turns out he's now my boyfriend. I did, and they came out. Barry was screaming, "Let me go!" but they kept him at bay. He was wearing all black and had a ski mask on his head and face. I knew it was him when the police came and they took it off and handcuffed him. In the hallway was a gym bag with duct tape, a bottle of some kind of pills, and 2 sets of handcuffs. There was also a knife on the floor the guys had kicked away from him. This sicko had followed me to my family's house and tailed me home, and he knew I was by myself. He was going to kidnap me, and what's even sicker, when the police investigated it deeper, at his place there was a dog cage in the basement with other restraints in it. That message he sent was totally true. Barry had all these bondage porno mags and DVDs all over his house, and I shudder to think what he had planned for me. He was arrested, of course, and charged with a lot of things that will keep him in jail for quite a while. As far as I know, he's still working on his 18-year sentence. Like I said, I started dating Jeff and stopped working at Hooters, and I got a job as a secretary in a law office. I think it's funny that Barry was a law school student, and I'm the one who ended up working in a law office. That was a really scary ordeal for me. I know it's not about fast food like I said at the beginning, but it did start with food. The creepiest thing that I still can't get out of my head was Barry saying, "You could have made this easier."